biggest question everybody has when a story like that comes out, how horrific it is why? Everybody wants to know why. Does that why intrigue you?
You have a situation on board. We encountered quite a few of those agents, CIA, MI5, and take an x-ray of Mrs. Jones, who is smuggling cocaine.
Wow, you just solved a crime. What have you learned, what it takes to be involved?
You sort of work with that and trying to find out why. And
ladies and gentlemen, I just want to take a quick break from our show to say a massive thank you and a big shout out to one of our amazing sponsors, Dave DiStefano. Dave is a mortgage broker with over 13 years in the business, and Dave has a great rapport with a network of lenders, including big banks, credit unions, trust companies, financial institutions, and private funds. He will work on your behalf to help you find the best mortgage with the most agreeable terms and the lowest interest rate. After meeting Dave many times and having great discussions with him, he provides a level of confidence and comfort in knowing that he is going to take care of you. If you want to reach out to Dave, you can find his office on 6293 Thoroldstone Road in Niagara Falls. For more information or to make an appointment for any of your mortgage needs, call 905-933-1090. That's 905-933-1090. And thanks for listening. Back to the show.
What's going on, Meeting Gold listeners? It's Chris Battaglia, 416 Coffee. Use the coupon code Meeting Gold to get 10% off your first order at 416 Coffee. Enjoy the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Meeting Gold Show. I want to introduce you to my good friend, Dr. Davis. How you doing
hello.
today? Good?
Good.
So we actually have a really interesting podcast, one that's different than most. Dr. Davis, you have been in the industry, in the medical industry for 40 years, you said?
Yep.
40 years. That's a very long time. What would you say, did you ever imagine that you'd be in the industry for 40 years, for as long as you have been?
I always wanted to be a doc ever since I was a little kid, so
you pursued it.
Just never thought about how long I would be in it. But
yeah. Wow, that's pretty incredible. The other thing that I don't want to skip over, but what I think is going to be the really interesting part of our conversation is you're an author. You've written 14 books.
That's right.
Okay, I want to dissect a little bit being in the medical field, but then also the genre of books you write about. They're not any sort of normal genre. This isn't it's not a princess in a Prince Fairyland here. This is a true conversation and story about real or not real things that have happened. Can you go into a little bit more detail?
Sure. Well, as part of my career as a physician, I worked in emergency room for a number of years, and usually an emergency room physician is scheduled by a person. And one day in Seattle, where I was practicing, the scheduler came up and said, "Hey, Paul, would you like to go to the Caribbean this next month?" And I said, Seattle, December, Caribbean, December? Sure. And he said, "Oh, one small catch, you'll be a doc on a ship." And I said, "Oh, okay. What is it?" He said, "You'll have to wear, uniform and, do all the things that an officer on a ship will be." And I said, "Okay." And so I went on that particular contract, and it was very interesting. You were in charge of taking care of all the crew members, the officers, and all the passengers. I had 3 nurses, but essentially you're the one who answers. And I said, "This is kind of neat," And so when I got back from this week, I talked to the scheduler, and I said, yeah, I'll do that again if you have other episodes. And he said, okay. And I did that on and off for 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was, various cruise lines, various parts of the world. I mean, I've probably been around the world 4 times with the various cruises. And, it was interesting. It's a young man's job, though.
Is it? What makes it a young man's job? Just
You're running up and down stairs all the time. You're running from one end of a cruise ship to the other. You're up all night, usually with somebody or something. And so it's a busy job.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still interesting, but it's, when you're not 20 anymore, it would take on you.
Yeah. What would you say the toll that took on you the last, like those 10 years, being as busy as what you were on the cruise lines? Do you think that took some sort of toll on you physically or emotionally within your role, or you were always up for, the next cruise ship that would come your way to work?
I was always up for the next cruise ship, but it did do damage to my knees running all that way.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That and being a ski jumper as a kid sort of did my knees in.
You gave the life out right away. You gave it past like 30.
I gave them up.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit more about what interested you, because, cruise ship, to me, I think that'd be fun to work on. But I guess you had so many options. You could work all over the world as a doctor, stay in Canada, which you're in now, or Seattle at the time. But the cruise ship, that interested you. Was it just the travel, or was it the people that were on board?
Both. I've always liked to travel. I've traveled, not only on that, but I've done volunteer work and I've hiked various things in the Himalayas. I do like to travel and do a variety of things in various parts of the world. But the cruise ship was a nice way of being able to see other parts of the world, and but the whole ambiance of working with the crew who came from all over the world too, the officers, of which you were one, and then the passengers. I mean, it kind of depended on what cruise ship you were on as to how crazy the passengers were, but it was always interesting. You had every day was a new story.
Really?
Oh yeah.
On a cruise ship?
Oh yeah.
So as this kind of relates to your books, and your books are, I mean, you were just telling me the slivers of what some of them are about, but how they relate to your books. Were these stories that you captured from being on the cruise ships, or things that you thought about could happen or would happen, and that you just, in your spare time, I guess, wrote some really, really good books?
No, they're for the most part all real. The characters are real. All the names have been changed. Names of the ships have been changed. So lawyers, back off. But no, I mean, as I say, there's some very interesting people, characters, etc. on cruise ships, and some of the officers are different people, and so I would tell sitting at dinner or any other time after I sort of finished my 10 years of doing that, I would tell people about some of the stories that went on. And, a lot of my friends said, "Paul, why don't you write these up as a book or a movie or whatever?" And there was actually a movie producer on one of the ships, and he said, "You got to write this down so I can produce this." And so then I started writing these novels.
Right. And that kind of just motivated you. So the genre that you're in with writing is murder mystery.
Right.
What interests you about that?
Well, some of the cases that I encountered and during my years there were, drug dealers who, did away with somebody, or somebody who threw their wife off or the husband off of the bow of the ship, or, there are a lot of traffickers, whatever. And then there's some of the staff members who were not ideal people, and did murders, carried drugs, and forfeited the safety of others because of that. And so it just seemed that the genre of murder mysteries was kind of led into that.
Fitting for you.
Yeah, fitting for that. So
Tell me a little bit more. I'm going to show your books here for a moment. So you titled them Cruise Ship Crime Mysteries. So obviously the cruise ship crime mysteries, that comes from you being on the cruise ships, right? And you saying that most of them are real. I'm sure you've added a little spice up details to make the book more engaging. Sure. But why, you would do that when you're telling the story anyway. So I guess it's not.
Sometimes.
There you go.
Sometimes you didn't need to.
Wow, that is crazy when you don't need to, just to keep people interested. I guess, people are always interested in those 60-minute videos of why wife, or I remember watching a 60 Minutes show on, I think the husband murdered his entire family with children, and they go into all the details of how they found out how. And I think the biggest question everybody has when a story like that comes out, how horrific it is why?
Yeah.
Everybody wants to know why. Does that why intrigue you? And is that what intrigued you to write these books?
Yeah, you have a situation on board, and you sort of figure, well, why did that happen, or why did that person do X, Y, Z? So you sort of work with that, and trying to find out why, and trying to find out with CIA, MI5. I mean, we encountered quite a few of those agents who were, we tried to help them. I mean, it was our job. My job was as a doc, but we were, trying to figure out what was going on, and trying to resolve the mystery, so to speak.
Okay, this question is pounding my head, and I was going to wait a little bit and try to talk a little bit more about your past in medical, which I think we can kind of push to the end, because I want to ask this question. Is there a story that haunts you or comes to your mind every single time that you're like, this is a must-tell story?
Oh, I think all 14 of them are.
I guess you wrote a whole book about each of them. So
Yeah. I mean, there's always something that was going on, and this was an opportunity to write it down, and especially since we did have a resolution to the books. They're not one of these, oh, okay, read this book and you'll get the answer in the next one or something. They all stand.
there's a resolution.
Yeah, they all are individual, standalone books. And if one wanted to do a series on TV or movies, yeah, you could easily do that out of one book, or you could do several.
Would that be the goal for you?
I think it would be a way. I mean, people don't read books as much anymore. They're all on Kindle and Amazon, and so you can sort of see it that way. But people watch TV and movies much more than reading, sitting down and reading paper.
Because it seems like everybody you've told these stories to are interested. It just,
Yeah,
you have to get it in front of the audience to listen, I guess, is the only thing.
exactly.
So can you talk about a story right now that you would say is maybe one of your most intrigued by the audience?
They're all interesting.
Which one would you say? I guess I'm not going to ask you to pick one, but I will say, can you talk about a story that you think you would like to tell? Because I think people would be, this is your opportunity to not make it a movie, but, give some audio to it.
Well, I mean, there's one that the book started just as a regular cruise, and there were various people on board, and there's a connection with Rome, and that some archaeologists who were doing some work at the Vatican, and so anyway, a number of these people came on board the ship, and this is true. And there was some question as to where the artifacts that were being brought back from Rome were, if they were supposed to or if they weren't. And then all of a sudden, there was a big container of these artifacts in the hold, along with suitcases and all that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, some of the people who were working in the hold and moving suitcases around and moving other stuff around started to get a strange rash. And
you had to deal with those rashes.
yeah, they came because they were crew members, so they came into the medical center, and he looked at the rash and started, and gave them cortisone cream and various.
But you're
other
wondering
things.
what it is.
But it looked a little strange. And then one of my nurses, who was actually the girlfriend of one of these crew members, she developed the rash. So I thought, oh, okay, this is an infective rash. This is not just, he's allergic to something. And so this went on, and we had actually an outbreak of this on the ship. And, well, I don't want to give the whole story, but, it ended up that, there were certain things that had been brought on board that undoubtedly were the cause of this rash, and, other things that went on with that.
You've piqued my interest. I think you could make a 1-minute story on video, leave it as a cliffhanger, and then probably post 14 of those just to get some more traction on the books. That's incredible. So when you're writing these stories, these books aren't short books. Like what would you say is the average page, like the page length?
200 to 220.
Right. How do you extend a story for that long? Like, where did that art of storytelling come for you? Because you could summarize a whole story in a minute, like you almost just did,
Right.
or write it in a 220-page book.
Well, you have to develop the characters. I mean, each individual is, has a story, and you need to develop that character so that they mean something in the book. There are a couple of characters that are ongoing in most of the books. Myself as the doctor, my girlfriend, who was on board many of the cruises, and a friend who was on many of the cruises. She's a playwright, a very famous playwright, and so she'd be on board and producing a play for the crew. The crew and passengers.
Right.
So the three of us were often the ones trying to figure out what was going on. Not officially from a police point of view, but it was just curiosity, etc. And as you'll see in some of the later books, um, there's usually something on a ship, but it's not totally on a ship. There's one in a manor where cancer is being treated, and the characters who are there, and I bring in some of the alternative cancer treatments, which is what this place was. And so not all of them are, totally on a ship. The earlier ones are only on a ship, and you just go on shore for a little bit. The latter ones, I mean, there's a robbery of a gemstone, a very large.
That took place, and then somebody brought it on the ship.
The actual robbery was in a museum on shore. And then, of course, the guys decided to bring it on the ship to take it to wherever they were going to take it.
So can I just jump in here? What makes cruise ships, like why cruise ships? Why do cruise ships have all these stories? Is it a way of transportation for non-law abiding people? Like is it what I didn't realize cruise ships would have so many stories, because if you've done it for 10 years, you've written 14 books. Each book has a incredible, horrific story that is just extremely interesting. That's over one a year, technically.
Yeah.
So how many cruise ships do you have to do to get those stories, I guess?
Well, you do quite a few. As a doc, you do usually a 3-month contract. And so you're on, a number of quite a few cruise ships. And they vary from Disney to, Celebrity, Holland America, as your large ships, to then the more boutique ships, the Viking, Silver Seas, Regent, some of those. So you get a different clientele on each of them. And you also, you have a variety of things that go on each one. Yes, you can transport illegal things. I mean, it's very easy because you're not stopping in a number of airports.
That's why people choose cruise ships.
That's probably one of the reasons. And I mean, they are much more specific about it these days. And they do x-ray all baggage coming on. So if there's something really unusual, they will definitely notice it. But, some things are fairly easy to bring onto a plane or bring onto a ship or your private jet. And by doing, by putting 100 people, 500 people, 5,000 people together in one place, you've got a small community. And that's what a cruise ship is. It's a small community. And so you've got all kinds of different, types of people. And I mean, if you go on Disney, yes, you're going to get mostly families and people who love Disney or, whatever. But that's pretty specific. And, you get on the smaller boutique ships, which are most of what my books are involved with, since that's where I ended up working a lot on. You don't have just one kind of person. You've got lots of different kinds of people, and they're all interesting, and they all have a different story, and that it takes time when you're writing to develop those stories.
Right. Did you have a past in writing books before that, or was it no research, just went right into it, told the story?
No, I was just writing to tell the story, and I did write some plays early on, and I used the friend on the ships. Her name's Babette. I used her as the playwright, and developed her character as a means of doing the plays. And there are a number of the books will have a full-length play incorporated into the book.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
you've dissected that and put it into the book.
Right.
Okay. I want to kind of take a step back here, and you've talked about your time on the cruise ships, and we'll revisit that. But medical.
Mm-hmm.
You were a child. You said that since you were a child, you wanted to be you wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
You wanted to help people. What about being a child influenced you to want to be a doctor? Do you have anything that comes to mind? Maybe your parents or friends, relationships, mentors?
Well, other than my father, a great deal of my relatives were doctors, going back quite a few years. So, I mean, I was familiar with the fact that, there were doctors in the family. But I would hear tales about what some of them did, and, I thought, oh, gee, that's neat. And, I used to help, just doing cuts and scratches of, fellow teammates at a swimming meet or, basketball or whatever. So, I always enjoyed doing that and being able to help people with that. And, it became, and then as I started doing my studies, high school, I took all the biology, physiology classes I could. And, understanding what actually makes people or animals in that instance tick was very interesting to me, and how you could determine what actually caused XYZ to happen.
It's like problem solving, it seems,
Yeah,
for you.
it is. It's problem
Yeah, it's
solving.
like I would imagine if you compare it to an entrepreneur who likes running a business, very similar in the sense that the biggest challenge you face every single day is problem solving. And you have to think quick, you have to think appropriately, and you don't really have too much time to, I guess, hum and haw over a decision, especially the more serious it gets, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there's an individual who's struggling from XYZ and, they've got okay, let's say somebody, I imagine, I don't know too much, but if you cut an artery, it's a really bad thing because they transfer blood, correct? So when you cut an artery, you're losing a lot of blood. You have this amount of time to identify where the problem is, what the problem is, and then save the problem. For you, that whole problem solving idea, forget about being a doctor for one moment, just problem solving in general. How do you feel you've adapted your skills over the course of your life as a problem solver?
Well, I mean, it's kind of built into being a doctor. Somebody presents with a set of symptoms, and it's your job to try to figure out what caused it and how to cure it. Your example of somebody cutting an artery is definitely that's more your emergency room type, problem solving, and you look at the problem. You have a number of resources available to you, more in an emergency room, of course, and you go ahead and take care of it. In an office practice, family practice, urgent care, you're doing much more. You don't have a history with the person, so you're trying to resolve things that they're presenting with. And then over time, you get to know more. Oh, they're a diabetic. Oh, they have carcinoma. They have, pulmonary disease. And, that relates to that. And that's how you resolve that particular thing.
I see. So it's almost every individual patient has a XYZ, I wouldn't say problems, but medical issues, I guess, that they struggle with personally. I mean, everybody's different. And then you as a doctor, being there, like they are your client, you're looking at that saying, okay, I know this person's medical history. I know their problems. Now, how do I use that to make a decision, an educated decision? Would you say that, I mean, I don't want to say there's any guessing as a doctor, but there must be some things when you're like, I don't know exactly if this is what's causing it. Have you ever had cases like that that really just stump you and you almost have to you're forced to make a decision?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you do. And fortunately, when you're here on land, you can, if you get to that point where you can't resolve it, then you call in a specialist and, who only thinks of that particular thing. And it's your job to figure out which kind of specialty you would want to refer the patient to so that hopefully you get an answer.
Right.
Or you do x-rays or MRIs or whatever. On a ship, you don't have all that, available to you. Some of the ships we had x-rays, minimal lab. They're much better now than they were when we were, doing it. But, even so, that gives you some more clues.
Right.
And when you take an x-ray of Mrs. Jones, who is smuggling cocaine, and you take an x-ray of her and you see these bags in her stomach, you go, okay, this is probably why you passed out. One of them broke. So, I mean, there are things like that too.
Wow. That even stories like that are things that you deal with and you're like, you just solved a crime through would you say that well, I guess I don't want to say most crimes in general because I think that's not the case, but on cruise ships, crimes are established or found out through a doctor or somebody in the medical field more than often, or not so much?
The doc is usually involved in something, yes. Whether it's the staff captain who's sort of the ship's policeman, and his security force, they'll often find things too. I mean, and then sometimes they'll call us in to, can you check this person out? I mean, they're saying they can't leave their room, but something funny's going on in there, and you as the doctor, can you go, hey, Mrs. Jones, are you okay? Can I help? I'm the ship's doctor. So there's a lot of that goes on.
Right. Just a lot of behind the scenes stuff. You mentioned one interesting thing, how x-rays and I guess the medical industry, how it's changed over the years just on cruise ships alone. But I kind of want to ask you this more generally. What has been some of the advances, or how have you seen medicine change over the 40 plus years you've been a doctor in the industry?
Oh, it's changed a lot. It's we didn't have the equipment initially. It was a lot more just on hand stuff. Listen with your stethoscope. Now we have Holter monitors. We have a variety of you can do a CT of the heart. You can do MRIs. It's opened up a great deal of things, and blood work too, and genetic testing, and there's all kinds of things. We had a little bit of that we could do on the ship at that time, and it helped resolve some of the issues. But you know, we didn't have 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have what we have now.
Right. And I think that everything you've talked about encapsulates what being a doctor is about. I mean, you're problem solving, number one. Two, you're helping people. You're finding answers. Whatever those answers look like, you're finding answers. You know, any of your cruise ship stories, all of the ones, they have a full story, a full history, and you entered into a little part of it to find out, okay, this is what's happened in the past. This is what we assume has happened in the past. This is what's going to now happen in the future. Now seeing the medical, what's happened, particularly to help you find out what that crime was, right? And then move forward from there and to dissect the problem with law enforcement. Of course, knowing or I guess putting up with those stories, I can't imagine dealing with, if there were human remains on a ship, or if there was a murderer on a ship, or smugglers on a ship, trafficking on a ship. If you're one to find that out, how that affects you, maybe not the first time, but the second time or the 14th time, what have you learned? How medicine, what it takes to be involved in that? Like, what personality traits do you need to handle such a rigorous and to most people, not what most people live through, horrific experiences?
Well, you look at it on a professional point of view, and if it was all personal and it was you who were being chopped up, or you who were having to swallow cocaine or whatever, yeah, that would be a totally different thing. But you look at it as a professional, and you try to resolve the problems, and you're not personally involved in stealing the diamond or the emerald in this case. You're not involved in smuggling. You're not involved in, you're looking at various ways that the intricacies of what goes on a ship. It's a lot of behind the scenes, the romance that goes on, besides the murders or whatever.
Yeah.
I try not to, in my books, make it too gory or too, overwhelming, the murder things. Yes, it's a murder mystery, but that's just the genre. The romance, the travel to various interesting places, the the entertainment that goes on, and some of the intricacies that go on between crew, and it makes an interesting story.
Yeah. It seems like you've really blocked or walled off the personal side of it and the professional side of it.
Yeah, I mean, personally, yeah, sure, you don't like to see people being murdered or people being, whatever left off or whatever. It's more, okay, this is my job to find out what's going on, and some of it was just more interest. I mean, what's going on here with Mrs. Jones, and how is she, involved in this, or here we are on Komodo Island, and gee, those are big, Komodo dragons, and so that's interesting. It's and then to make it a little more interesting, it's also what sometimes happens in those situations.
Wow. yeah, it's incredible to dissect the stories. And if somebody does want to go and read a book, I mean, Dr. Davis said they're available on Amazon, at most reading platforms to go and read. I wanted to just ask you a few more questions before we end this off. The experience in medicine, what would you say it has taught you over the last 40 years? I mean, there's a lot of people right now who might be listening who want to become a doctor or just get into the medical field of some sorts. What's the one thing that you've learned, or one life lesson that you've taken out of being a doctor?
That's an interesting question. Well, please do become a doctor or a nurse or whatever, because we need a lot more of them. You know, our staffing is very low. I think the main thing is that you can help people. I mean, in the last 10 plus years, I've been doing a lot of volunteer work, and I mean, that's, not as exciting as, what goes on a cruise ship, but it is. I mean, you can actually help people, and I think that's one of the things, even if it's a small thing. I mean, you've got a sty in your eye, you've got something in your ear, you've got, lesions on your legs, whatever it is. I mean, you actually can do something to help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's the one thing that over the years you really do see, and you know, and you're doing that in the novels too. You're helping resolve the problem, and you're helping others.
Right. It's a fulfilling career,
Yeah.
to say the least. Despite there's good money out there for doctors, but I think the more important thing is getting into it with the mindset that you get to make an impact, you get to help people, you change people's lives, hopefully for the better as much as you can. Right? There's only so much control you have as a doctor, but I think that's an important thing to consider. Dr. Davis, we always do this last question on our show, and it's actually, we ask the last guest that was on what they would like to ask you. They don't know who you are. They didn't even know that we were interviewing you. They have to ask a random question. And this week's question for you is, what is your way of showing appreciation? It's a tough question. You might have to think about that one.
Say it again?
What is your way, how do you show appreciation towards people?
Just saying, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing what you do. And, you're a mechanic, you're a pilot, you're a, captain of a cruise ship. Thank you for doing what you do and doing it well.
And I mean, the other thing, I think you show appreciation, and you're humble enough to not say it, but I mean, helping people over the last 40 years being a doctor. But, that's another big one too. I guess my last question for you is, what would you like to ask the next guest? I can't tell you any details about them, but you can come up with a question that you'd like us to ask the next person.
What are you going to do to help others?
That's an interesting one. What are you going to do to help others? All right. Well, I think that about wraps up our interview. I am definitely going to go and read one of your books, because I can see myself getting hooked on many of them. I might be I might be bedridden if I jump on one of your books. But how can people go check out your books, purchase your books? Sounds like they're available online, but you can give a little bit more details on that.
Yeah, they're all on Amazon, Kindle. That's the easiest way. Some bookstores have them. Few libraries have them. But for the most part, it's online ordering.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, you guys are more than welcome to check it out. Anybody listening, watching, I hope you were intrigued by the interview, and I hope that you learned a thing or two out of it. If you're going to become a doctor, this is the guy you're going to want to talk to. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week on another interview. With all that, I'll see you later, guys.